Hi everyone, my name is Charlie and today I have my September wrap up. I don't know what is going wrong with my reading at the moment, but I can't seem to find the want to read books incredibly quickly as I have done previously. A year ago, I was reading about 3 books a week. Indeed, I quite liked that. I liked spending my days off not watching television and whiling away my time, going on walks and reading and writing. And yet, even though the opportunity has arisen a lot this year, more than usual, I have greatly reduced the amount that I read per day. But at the same time, with me saying all of this, I have actually found some more favourite books this month, having read slower. And so I think I still need to have that conversation with myself as to whether reading slowly allows me to be more interactive with a book, and spending so much time with it helps me to gather all of my opinions. There are some books here I want to talk about today, some books that I don't, so I will run through everything I've read and then pick and choose here and there what I want to talk about. Firstly, I read Paper Aeroplanes by Simon Armitage. Then I read Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell, Hotel World by Ali Smith, David Copperfield by Charles Dickens, and Flames by Robbie Arnott. I also read a few stories from Nudie Branch by Aronis and Okaji, but I haven't read the entire collection yet, so I will just hold off reviewing this until I have read this one. Firstly, one book that I won't be talking about in any length here is David Copperfield, because I did record my entire vlog talking about this book, which goes on for about 50 minutes. This is the first time I have taken a book and annotated it so thoroughly, and I think that that has changed the way I interacted with this book, and I did say that a lot in the video. I am still struggling with my thoughts on this one, mulling them over, because throughout the first few hundred pages I believed this was going to be my favourite Charles Dickens, and the final 200 pages did let me down, but the more time away from it, the more I do think it might actually be my favourite. I'm questioning whether I can yet forgive the flaws I saw. Can I forgive the treatment of certain characters? I don't know, but it's definitely what I'm going to be thinking about, and I do plan on revisiting in future. Another book that I don't want to talk much about is Paper Aeroplanes by Simon Armitage, simply because this was selected poems from his collections, so I only read the poems from the collections that I hadn't already read. Simon Armitage is a favourite poet of mine, and so I still remained impressed by the work that I was reading. But admittedly, I can't say as though I found anything new and standing out. I think, as with all poetry, it's something I'd have to revisit in future. I think if you're a fan of Simon Armitage and you haven't read everything by him, then definitely pick it up. Or if you just wanted a sample of everything he's published over the last 30 years, this would be a good place to go. It's just that I read it and kind of forgot most of what I read. And that leaves us with these 3 books to talk about. Something I noticed in my reading this month is that everything I read seemed to have the theme of death in there. I found this quite interesting because I thought we're heading towards the more autumnal months, the slackening off of the year, the plants dying and being reborn, and I just found it strange that I was reading so much about death. And I don't know whether I would have noticed it as much if I hadn't been reading David Copperfield, which is a novel that is absolutely soaked in it. Indeed, had I read everything that I wanted to last month, there would have been another 2 books on there that were about death, one being The Death of Vivek Oji by Akwaeke Emezi, and then I also wanted to read The Quickening by Rhiannon Ward. Unfortunately, I didn't get to those, and they have been pushed back in favour of Victober books, but if I find a moment here or there, I might pick one of them up. Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell won the Women's Prize last month, and I was incredibly thrilled by this because this is the first time that I have read a work by O'Farrell and thought that everything has come together for me. Previously, I've read her works, and whilst I have enjoyed her writing style, I haven't enjoyed the story that she has written and the way she has chosen to craft the tale. But there was something about the way in which Hamlet was written that really just gelled with me and my tastes. Something that did happen that might have influenced how I felt about this book is the fact that I saw a few links to Joanne Harris's Vianne Rocher books. Notably because Vianne Rocher is a mother who practices some sort of everyday magic, and Agnes in this book is a mother who also some people may see as being magical. I question whether she is supposed to be more of a herbalist, more into traditional ways. And I like that how this was explored, this sense of someone becoming more cosmopolitan whilst Agnes might be more into the country traditional manner. But also something that Maggie O'Farrell captured that Joanne Harris captures in her books is the anxieties of being a parent. And naturally, Hamnet is a book that is steeped in death because it is about the death of a child. And the reader knows whilst reading it that one character who we're reading about is not going to make it the entire way through the narrative. And that has this sense of foreshadowing about it all, this inevitability that had me questioning as a reader how that must feel, because Agnes is a mother who has seen so many people die from this plague that is running rampant throughout the town. Agnes is written as though she might have the possibility to prophesy and see into the future. She's a character I was so thrilled to see explored. I could remove Shakespeare from the story completely, and I could remove everything from the story and just have had this tale of a mother with anxieties I think that most parents must face. I mean, I'm not speaking from experience here, but just from looking after my nephew, I'm aware of how protective I am of him. So I can only imagine that that's tenfold for a parent. And I can imagine how difficult and terrifying it must have been at the time to be sending your child out into a world facing all this sort of adversity. Death is both a figurative and literal spectre throughout the entirety of this novel. I like books that do this, that have this possible touch of the supernatural, because I think sometimes, even though we like to think we're all very logical human beings, there are still moments where we'll talk about, and I do it myself, talking about signs, and we have something that's been inbuilt in us because of sayings and stuff. Those touches of the supernatural colour the story in such a way that it gives you a sense of the superstitions that run rampant throughout the town and through the characters. Originally, I said I was going to do a separate review of this, and that may still be the case, where I properly go through and identify how this book came to make me feel such a way. But it has definitely become a book that I look forward to revisiting, and it's given me more faith in O'Farrell as an author that maybe it never was the fact that I didn't care for the writer, I just didn't care for the work of the writer that I was reading, and there's every chance that O'Farrell has some books out there that I will adore just as equally. Then we have Hotel World by Ali Smith, and this is a difficult one for me to talk about because I have always liked the way that Ali Smith writes. I think that there is poetry in her prose. I usually understand somewhat where she's coming from. I'm not sure how I feel about this book. It begins from the perspective of a ghost, trying to figure out how they came to be dead and the story of their death. You soon find out that there has been a death associated with this hotel. We go from the ghost's head into people who work at the hotel, people who observe the hotel, and family members of this dead persons. There is something of the mystery surrounding the girl's death in the beginning. What Smith does here is talks about people's reaction to death and how it can just be a moment to the people who don't know the dead person, and yet it is everlasting for the people who are close family, and how it affects people differently, how it might affect a corporation over an individual, that sort of thing. I like Ellie Smith's prose, but I found this book somewhat of its time, if that makes sense. Whilst I was reading it, I felt as though I had a great sense of when this book was set, simply because of the way things were being discussed and what was being discussed. That isn't a bad thing. It gives this book a very definite sense of time and space, but it's not my favourite of Ellie Smith's. I suppose that I did enjoy seeing this discussion of death and grief because I'm a bit morbid that way, but I don't know, it took me, this was the third time I'd picked this book up to try and read it, and this was the time that I just said, no, I've got to knuckle down and do it. It's good, but it's just good enough, if that makes sense. You know, it's not necessarily a book I'm going to revisit or remember, but I appreciated it at the time to be sat there reading it. And then we have Flames by Robbie Arnott. This book gave me the grim, macabre mysticism of Jess Kidd with the storytelling skills of David Mitchell. And I have a new favourite book. I love this book. I don't think there's any other way to talk about it. So, in this family, the women die, and a few days down the line, they come back, and they only stick around for a bit before they promptly burst into flames again. Usually it's because they have some unfinished business to attend to, so they come back, they do that, they disappear again. What this book does is that it shows a family where the matriarch has died, and then the brother and sister that remain, her children, start to drift apart. And from then on, we move through the story, but what Robbie Arnott does is similar to David Mitchell. He does not stick with the same character. So you will move out of one person's story into another person's story who's somehow connected to the bigger picture of it all. And it expands and it expands before slowly coming back in on itself. And I don't know how the author did it. It's only 230 so pages, and he managed to fit so much in. I feel like I knew every single character that was in here. It was also funny. It told several different types of story. You've got fantasy and crime noir and just domestic thriller in here. And he made it all work. And the magic that was here, whether it was magic or not, was stupendous. And it was probably allegory for something. I don't know. But the entire time that I was reading this book, I was thinking about how this is the sort of book that I should be writing. And whenever a book makes me feel like I want to be creative and I want to be responding to another, responding to it in that sort of way, I always think it's been a very good book indeed. It's weird and wondrous. I am looking forward to revisiting this and rereading it again. I'm looking forward to reading The Rain Heron by this author. I borrowed this book from the library in January when I first heard about it. Since then, I've seen Matthew of MCS Books do a dual review of this author's 2 books, which I will leave a link to because I'm not going to be able to do anything but exalt this novel because I think it's marvellous. It's one of those things where I know categorically that it's not a book that's for everyone, but it completely suited my tastes. It was brilliant. That's all I'm going to say is that it was a brilliant read, and I had never considered telling a story in this fashion before, but it makes complete sense, and I would love to try something of a similar form to tell a story in future, and this left me hopeful that I'd be able to figure out how to do that. There we go. Them's the books. If you've read any of these books and would like to discuss them, then please feel free to do so in the comments. I hope you enjoyed this video, and until next time, that is all.